Podcast City Network.
And we are back here on Final Score with Chris and Craig, who is still here with me. Glad you haven't run away yet.
Hey, I'm still here, man.
I'm still here. I know I butcher NBA names and, make crazy claims and bold predictions where I got 2 out of 3 right for the All-Star weekend. But you know what? Still great that you're here, though. But to make sure we don't really have you running for the hills, we have to touch on a subject to really test some things. And we're going to go scamper on over to some NFL news, where we had a little bit of a settlement, a conclusion of sorts with the Kaepernick and Reed collusion case that was happening, which has gotten so much media coverage over the past few months, actually a better part of the year. And it's really interesting to see how this ended up playing out. Yeah. Because there was a lot of scrutiny from both sides on Kaepernick on why he really wasn't in the NFL. Whether it was playing style or if it truly was collusion, because of his political stances and his activism. Thing is, though, Eric Reed was still in the league for a majority of this, even though he had to wait till week 4 of this past season to be signed by the Carolina Panthers, but played well enough to garner a little bit of an extension. But
yeah, he just signed a 3-year extension this week. Was it this week or just recently?
Oh, it was last Tuesday, I believe.
Last week.
Yeah, 3-year, $22 million.
Okay.
Which is definitely respectable for a player of his caliber, I feel. Yeah. But with the Kaepernick side, obviously, he still has not been signed.
Yeah, so we were just going to touch on this subject, but then we realized how we are on opposite sides of the fence here.
We are very
on this subject.
Sides. Very opposite.
So we wanted to make this a much bigger segment because this is almost going to be kind of like a debate, if you will.
I think it will be.
I think so. I didn't realize how far apart we were on this subject.
I'll keep it respectable.
You keep it respectable? Okay. But so basically what happens in this collusion settlement, Mike Freeman, who's an NFL columnist for the Bleacher Report, he tweeted out recently that a number of NFL team officials, this is in quote, a number of NFL team officials are speculating to me is the NFL paid Kaepernick in the $60 to $80 million range.
Well, to make sure that we put this out there first, though, is the fact that when they came to the conclusion of the settlement, which never went to trial, never went anywhere past mediation, is that they all signed a confidentiality agreement to where the actual outcome in terms of this settlement will never be announced. And I think that is very telling from a lot of different angles. But the big thing that I look at is that you're never going to know what that true dollar amount was.
Yeah, you're right. And I think when we were discussing this, you think this is a money grab by Kaepernick.
I absolutely think it is.
And I am on the opposite side of this, thinking that the fact that they had to sign a non-disclosure agreement and it never went to court means that there is fire behind this smoke, and the NFL is trying to hurry up, cover it up, brush it under the rug, and move on.
Well, while the NFL has taken that approach with a lot of different scandals in the past, I don't feel it's quite that way with this. And hear me out, because the big thing I look at with this is that it can look like it's collusion, sure, because he went on signed by a bunch of different teams who signed what could be viewed as slightly lesser talented quarterbacks to be a backup, to be a third stringer. And I can maybe understand that to an extent, but here's the thing I look at. Stats-wise, Kaepernick, in my opinion, is utter garbage. He has not really been able to live up to the hype of what a franchise quarterback should be able to produce in any type of an offense. And with that, he was not only selfish with the ball, but he tried to make plays where there were no plays to be made because there was nothing there. When a typical quarterback might throw the ball away, you have him trying to scramble and end up with a 3 or 4 yard loss. You have him trying to force the ball downfield when he should be throwing it out of bounds, and he's throwing an interception. His quarterback rating was in the dumpster, if I'm not mistaken, during his last year, and he lost his starting job to his backup, which I think was Blaine Gabbert, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was.
And I look
Good
at
old
that,
Blaine.
Good old Blaine Gabbert. But the thing I look at is that he also opted out of the final year of his contract by his decision, not by the 49ers, not by the NFL, not by his agent, by him. He decided to opt out of that because he could have still stayed and been able to battle for the starting quarterback position. Now, another thing I look at as well is that recently he was approached by the AAF to try and join the league and wanted $20 million guaranteed. Now, as the coverage that we've done with the AAF this week and last week, we know that the AAF is not a league that is made in an NFL archetype. It's not here to throw millions of dollars at players.
Right.
It's here to give a salary to players over a course of time to help try and get them back to the NFL, which $20 million, that's almost double what all the players in the entire AAF will make this season.
Yeah, they only make the $250K over
a 3
years.
Yeah, it's just a shade over $80,000 a year.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing I look at in this, is that to me it looks like a money grab in tying with the fact that you wanted to try and throw that at an upstart league. The fact that you obviously, you didn't go to trial, but you still are going to profit from this settlement regardless to try and get money, and then hopefully in the hopes that maybe you might get signed to a team here in the future, which, his lawyer came out and said, not even his agent, his lawyer came out and said, oh yeah, there's a lot of teams that should be interested, like the Panthers, the Patriots, and a third unnamed team. No lawyer says that kind of thing. And that's what I look at, is that sure, he's done a lot of great activism. Sure, he's done a lot of great community service. But is this really him just trying to pat himself on the back? Or is this him really trying to help people?
So it is interesting that you're looking at this from a completely on-the-field standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
From that perspective, I'm not disagreeing with you that Kaepernick is a garbage quarterback.
Super garbage.
However, he's still better than Blake Bortles. I will continue to throw shade at him.
Ooh,
it's okay.
And Blake Bortles starts.
And I know he's a hell of a lot better than I would be at quarterback. I understand that. I am not an athlete. I am, but not a great athlete. You know what I mean? But you're looking at this from a completely on-the-field perspective.
Mm-hmm.
None of this has to do with on-the-field production. That's the big reason behind this whole scandal and this whole settlement, is this was about speaking out against not necessarily the league stance, but their lack thereof stance of players expressing things that are going on in their communities, specifically police brutality against African American citizens.
Correct.
And youth specifically. So I think part of this, a majority of this, the reason why it got so inflated, because he wasn't the only one involved in this. Of course, Eric Reed was just as vocal as he was in this whole part of the process.
And was still able to keep playing.
But the reason there's so much of a magnifying glass on this is because he plays the quarterback position. That's the big reason. If he played any other skill position, he would still probably have a job, and this wouldn't even be an issue. But it's because he's a quarterback and he wants to stay playing quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's the NFL part of it. You talked about the AAF. That, to me, wasn't I'm only going to play for you if it's $20 million because I think I'm worth $20 million as a quarterback. No, I think he threw that offer out there on purpose because he does not want to play for the AAF, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, He wants to play in the NFL. So do all the guys in the AAF too. But I think his is more so throw a big enough number out there that they won't even think about negotiating with me. Because his worry right now, since he stopped playing, has been full-time activism. And he's been supremely active in that realm. And so doing a little bit of homework on a lot of the stuff that he's donated to. And he's done so much already within a year, 2 years even. And he's doing a lot now with other celebrities. So he was doing this 10 by 10 different charities with essentially 10 different celebrities, give or take. But he donates a minimum $10,000 to these 10 different charities and asks another celebrity to match him in this.
Okay.
But a lot of his, and even his Nike contract, you talked about his Nike signing.
Yes, and the huge ad campaign they had with that.
The huge ad campaign. So it's not just lining his pockets. So the new contract also has contributions to his charity called Know Your Rights. And Know Your Rights is a campaign to raise awareness of, quote, higher education, self-empowerment, and instruction to properly interact with law enforcement in various scenarios, end quote. So this is basically this organization, which is entirely funded by the Colin Kaepernick Foundation. They want to, quote, fight oppression of all kinds globally through education and social activism, end quote. So I think a lot of this, all that 60 to 80 million he's getting, he's just trying. Yeah, of course he's going to want to get it financially because,
of course,
make your money while you can, kind of thing.
Definitely,
especially from a big giant like the NFL, where they've, like you said, so many times before, try to sweep things under the rug and get going. I think this is more of an indictment on the NFL. They don't want this to get out because they know that the owners colluded against him specifically because of all this circus that's going on around him.
Well, the big thing I look at with this, and you had said so yourself, being a quarterback, it's a much more high-profile position.
Correct.
There's a lot more attention on you, and typically 9 times out of 10, you're going to be the face of a franchise. Now,
yes,
I'm not saying the NFL actually colluded. There may have been, but I don't think it would have been intentional collusion because you have a player, like what I said earlier, who wasn't always playing the best, where he was throwing a lot of interceptions, making dumb plays, things like that. But the thing I look at is that from a owner standpoint, from a GM standpoint, from a head coach standpoint, as an overall business, let's take it off the field. Let's go ahead and look at the business aspect. If you are running a franchise and you have a player who is so heavily involved in activism where you have fan bases that are going to be so split on a person of this nature, you're going to end up with a split fan base where you might end up actually affecting your ticket sales, your merchandise sales, attendance for games, attendance for events. And another thing you got to look at with that maybe it was the fact that teams didn't really want to take a chance having that type of distraction. Now, we've already seen what's happened with Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, all these prima donna players that have come out and become distractions for their teams and ultimately ended up tanking their seasons. I don't think a team's going to want to take a chance on that kind of guy who's going to come in, still have all of his activism going on, which I'm not against the activism. I'm not against the community service or the social activism that he's doing. I think it's great stuff.
Right.
But with the way he's doing it and this is the one thing I didn't agree with, is that you're doing it in the workplace. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. Everybody's entitled to how they want to operate their lives outside of work. However, I don't feel that being on your employer's stage, having your activism be shown to the world is a place to be doing it. And I feel that he took advantage of that and the 49ers, the stage that they provided for him. And on top of that, he ended up becoming a large distraction that 49ers really have not recovered from. They have not been able to get really star players to come step in until they were able to acquire Jimmy Garoppolo, who ended up going down with an injury anyways. So with that, as an owner or a GM, I would not want to have that type of distraction. And then what kind of locker room presence does that end up putting out there?
So why don't you ask the Philadelphia Eagles about Malcolm Jenkins? He did the same thing. But it didn't affect them at all.
But when it comes to Eric Reed, Malcolm Jenkins, and these others that did stand up for this, they never took their activism, I feel, to a level of where Kaepernick is at. Now, obviously, the Nike deal came way after. It came way after. Well, all of them were kneeling. All of them were saying things to the press about why they were doing what they were doing. But I always felt Kaepernick took it that little bit further because he did want to get to where he is now, where he is able to make a lot of differences. And I think that is wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And I agree with what he's actually trying to do. With how he's trying to do it, though, and how this all started is what I don't agree with. Because the thing is, as an owner, I would never take a chance on a player like that.
Okay, I understand that, and basically you're saying don't do it on your owner's platform, correct?
Yes.
On your work platform.
Yes.
So don't do it on the NFL's platform.
Yes. Because at the
how
end
come
of the day,
it works in the NBA then?
Well, NBA is a different league and not run by the people that run the NFL. Exactly.
That is my point. The NFL, and this is why I think that they don't want this stuff to come out in the public. They don't want to come out in the public of any of the details of this because I honestly do think, and I used to be on the opposite end where you're at on this, but reading into this and kind of educating myself a little bit more on it, I honestly feel like they did collude against him specifically because do you remember when they wanted to sign Kaepernick in Baltimore right before they signed Lamar Jackson, or right after they drafted Lamar Jackson?
I do remember that, yes.
Remember that? So all signs pointed to they were going to sign him. But then all of a sudden, mysteriously, the deal fell through. But I think the NFL as a whole, they want this, and this is, other players have made these big statements about, it's basically a kind of like a slavery league. And I mean, other players have made those kinds of comments, and look at the NBA. The NBA is, and in my opinion, they're doing it right. They're empowering their players to be active in their communities and to express themselves in their social activism, which is why you see a lot of those players speaking out on things like this. And Silver is encouraging it. Why can't the NFL do that?
I think it's a little different in certain aspects, because when you have the amount of players that are on a roster on the NBA versus a roster in the NFL, the numbers are substantially different. The
Correct.
NFL rosters are a lot larger.
You got 53 guys, and you've got a lot of big personalities on those teams. I understand that. But why are you trying to shut down social activism so hard the way that the NFL and Goodell, they basically had the owners release statements like Jerry Jones
there's a perfect example.
Nobody's going to kneel on my football team.
Which I don't agree that he should have taken that stance either. And
he wasn't the only owner that did so.
And I think the Miami owner was one as well, and there's a few others. But the thing I look at is that there could have been a better way to have approached this. Instead of
I completely agree.
Just being, outspoken activism in the workplace, on, prime time on these big national stages, why not approach the NFL and try to work something out like Adam Silver did, where he's trying to promote this and trying to help them with being able to get that message out there?
If I'm not mistaken, players have tried to approach the league about doing what the NBA started doing, and the league responded with I think it was like one weekend, they did a quote like social activism weekend, which was like, okay, we're going to do this thing. It's kind of like not necessarily the salute to service weekend, which is the way it used to be. It was just, we're going to slap some camo on the gloves and stuff, and we're going to call it that. That's gotten a lot better. So I'm not knocking that at all, because I definitely respect our military and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
And, I give them way too much credit as far as I couldn't do some of the things that they do.
No, definitely.
But the way that they treated that social activism weekend that they did was a complete mockery of what the players wanted to accomplish with it.
Right.
So I think, again, this is more of an indictment on the league. They're not ready to be this kind of progressive. They're not ready to be progressive. They're stuck in the old days.
Acting like it's the 50s and 60s all over again, right?
I think so. I mean, I just don't see why. I don't think Kaepernick's ever going to play in the NFL again.
I don't either.
Because not only because of how this happened, but he still wants to play quarterback. So not
even just play quarterback. He wants to be a starter.
And he wants to start. I don't see any team other than Miami or Jacksonville that he could actually start and be better than the current QB that is there, or is no longer there in some cases.
As the case may be.
But yeah, I don't see him playing in the NFL again. But I think this is a huge step. If he takes the correct steps moving forward immediately, I think this could be huge for him and his foundation and all the charitable work he does. But I think the NFL is going to try to tie up this money and not get it to him in a timely manner as far as when this is settled.
Well, the thing is with that, and what's really going to be hard to tell, is the fact that there is this confidentiality agreement that's in place to where they can't talk about the terms of the outcome. And I feel with that really does a disservice to everything with this, because we don't truly know what the numbers are. We don't truly know what actually happened. And we actually don't even know who even initiated the confidentiality agreement. We don't know if it came from Kaepernick's side. We don't know if it came from the NFL side. We really don't know.
Oh, no, I can tell you right now. I know who it is. And they've actually, I've read an article on it. Yes, the NFL is the one that activated this. They wanted to settle. The NFL came to Kaepernick and his team and said, we want to settle with you.
Well, see, the big thing I look at
that, again, to me, is another very telling sign that the NFL is trying to cover this stuff up.
Well, like I said earlier, whether it's intentional or unintentional with the collusion, I think to a certain extent, yes, it probably did happen. But whether it was, like I said, intentional or unintentional is something that we will never know. And because I know that as an owner, you're not going to want to take a team on troubled people, or even people that are taking stands that could just end up being a large distraction. Like when the Philadelphia Eagles went and got Michael Vick after he had all the things happen with him,
right,
and the brutality against animals and everything he had to do with his jail time and staying in a halfway house after being released by the Falcons and all of the trouble he had to go through, he battled back. And he ended up doing the right things to be able to get into a position to be able to get back onto an NFL squad. And the Philadelphia Eagles took that chance. And Michael Vick did right. He did everything that was asked of him. He worked well with PETA, being able to get out the messages about abuse against animals and being able to step into a backup role and accept that role because he knew he did wrong and he knew he had to work back to become a starting quarterback again. Now, obviously,
right,
that is a little bit different of a situation from this one.
It's a very different situation.
But
yes.
the thing I look at, Kaepernick's been away from football longer than Vic was. And
right,
with that, not saying that he hasn't stayed in shape, but if he's doing all this activism, how much training are you really doing? How much do you expect to really be able not only to step into a quarterback role, but step in as the starting quarterback for a team? And like you said, there's very few positions where he could probably outplay the current starting quarterback. And I agree with the Miami and Jacksonville viewpoint on that. But you've been away for so long. There's quarterbacks coming out. There's quarterbacks on the move in the league itself. You still have Nick Foles that's going to be sitting out there that we know is not going to be playing in Philadelphia next season.
Right.
You're going to have more than likely Ryan Tannehill is going to be on the move. Brock Osweiler is probably going to end up being on the move because they're both garbage and someone's going to take a stupid chance on them. But at the at the end of the day, you also have Haskins coming out. You got Drew Lock from Missouri coming out. You also, of course, have Kyler Murray coming out, which we'll have more on him later.
Daniel Jones from Duke.
You have the starting quarterback for UConn, who actually recently followed the Final Score Twitter, so make sure you hop on the Final Score and give us a follow at PCN Final Score. He's even coming out. So you have so many different talented quarterbacks that are coming out that could easily fill in for these teams. I think it's past the point of him being able to step in as a starter unless he goes in with a Michael Vick approach and realizes, you know what? I've been gone for a few years. No one knows what I can do. I need to go in and get somewhere.
So I agree.
Try and work into that kind of position.
I agree from an on the field perspective, but you talked about Vic and off the field. He released all these statements with PETA and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How do you handle that if you're Kaepernick?
And that's where everything's going to get muddled.
There's no way you can come out. You're not going to come back to the NFL and basically backtrack on everything that you fought so hard for over the last few years. I think maybe a team kind of extends an olive branch to come to training camp to sign him this upcoming season. But other than that, I think his football's done.
Well, the thing I look at too is that Eric Reed, even after he got signed with the Panthers, was still kneeling on the sideline, being very vocal about his social activism.
Right.
And the Panthers have just let it go. They're like, you know what?
You gotta
understand.
You got to let him be him.
Yeah, we're going to let you be you, and we're not going to penalize you. We're not going to do the things like you said, what Jerry Jones was doing, trying to say you're not going to kneel for the anthem, or being like Miami, who said they were going to start suspending players at one point. So I don't think it would be anything like that. Now
that is PR suicide.
It is PR suicide to the max. So you end up with this very clouded, very complicated situation that I don't think any team is going to want to touch. Even if they do extend an olive branch, I think that's all it's going to end up being is here's an olive branch. We're trying to make peace with you, but sorry, we're not going to sign you.
Yeah, probably what's going to happen is a team will extend an olive branch and he'll probably decline because it's not a guaranteed contract or anything like that. So that'll probably be the end of that. But you're talking about no owner wants to bring head cases and things like that on their team. What about the Bengals? Like half their team's been in prison
at one point or another. But remember, that was all under Marvin Lewis, and now he's gone.
And now he's gone. I know there's another thing, like Josh Gordon's another one who's been suspended for. That's much different reasons he's been suspended for. But people are still willing to bring that kind of a player in. But this is because it's the quarterback position. I don't see it.
Well, I think it's very, very different from other situations you've seen. Like you mentioned with Josh Gordon, he couldn't stop smoking pot. Ricky Williams was another one, couldn't stop smoking pot. You end up with a lot of different players that had different either domestic violence issues, had thieving issues, like Jameis Winston, who stole a bunch of lobster from
crab
Publix.
legs
In his pants while at FSU. You've had a number of different players that have struck women, have been getting DUIs, who all kinds of different issues. Yet this is very different because this wasn't necessarily something that was a disciplinary issue. It wasn't that, hey, I went out and made a mistake and I killed a bunch of dogs in a dogfighting ring. No, this is just I took a social activism stance. I stood up for what I believe in, but now you leave yourself where you're almost untouchable in the sense that no one's going to want to sign you.
Well, I give him credit though for sticking with it because
I do too.
That just goes to show you the hypocrisy of the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
That all the things that you just listed, players have done in the past, and they still get jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But a handful of guys stand up for a social cause that they believe in very strongly, and one of those players, because of the position he plays, basically gets singled out. And gets to be punished for it.
I can definitely understand your point of view when it comes to that. I don't think he should be punished for being socially active, but I think there's a time and there's a place. And I think that's the big thing is that you're not going to want a guy who's going to say, I get you after a game and say, you're Colin Kaepernick, and I put you up on the stage to do a media segment to talk with the media after a game. What are you going to talk about? Are you going to talk about the game or are you going to talk about your social activism? And I think that's what scares owners.
Well, that's also the media's fault because the first questions the media is going to ask Colin Kaepernick is about all social. They're going to now if he plays on a team, he goes into training camp. First thing you're going to talk about is this settlement.
Oh, that'll probably be the very first question off.
The very first question out of people's mouths. So for that perspective, if he wants to go in and play, and a team offers him to play, let the guy play. Just let him play. Stop doing these. Media nowadays just dig for stuff.
Even if it's not there.
Yeah, even if it's not there, they dig for stuff and they make it so much more than it should be. But the first questions that come out of their mouths is, well, what about this collusion settlement? His first response is going to be, I'm not allowed to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is going to be the same question as the first, but said in a different way.
You know what? You could just take the Marshawn Lynch approach and just say, hey, I'm just here so I don't get fined.
I wish he would take if he does this, comes back and gets on a team, I want him to take the Bill Belichick approach.
Oh my goodness.
And just say the same answer talking about the game or what's going on in the field. I hope he takes that kind of approach because that to me, I would love it because I love it. And Baker Mayfield does this really well.
Yeah, he does.
And that's why I love him. He shuts down the Colin Cowherds of the world and
Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah, he shuts them down and just shuts them out right away. I love it when players do that, especially when they get stupid media questions. If they're legitimate media questions, like Katie once in a while gets a legitimate media question that he doesn't like, and he basically whines about it and complains that that's a bad question. But I love it when players shut down the stupid questions, and I guarantee you Kaepernick would get a ton of those dumb questions.
Because I feel like at the end of the day that you are right, just because they're just going to want to dig and dig and dig and dig until they find something out about this.
That's
this
all
settlement.
Our media is nowadays. Doesn't matter if it's sports or not. Everybody's damn vultures.
Yeah, they're all vultures. Just trying let's not focus on the game or anything going on. Let's go ahead and get to the meat and juice of something you did wrong or something that we feel is that we want answers to that you're not going to be willing to give us.
Right.
And that's going to play a huge part into it. But you know what? At the end of the day, I feel Kaepernick will never play in the NFL again, period. He might get the olive branch. He might not.
Right.
That's going to be speculative, and maybe we'll see over the course of the next 6 months or so. But the big thing that I see here is that what he decides to do with this money, whenever he actually receives it, I think is going to be very, very telling to what his approach really is. Is he money grabbing, or is he really trying to use this for the better good?
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see. We'll see if the NFL releases said money right away, or how long that process takes, because the settlement statement just came out within the last week or so. There's a lot of other things, moving parts that have to be done before this is actually finally put to rest. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
But once that does break and we see everything go through, that we're going to cover it here on Final Score.
Podcast City Network.